Hello, I'm Somi Arian. I'm a tech philosopher, author, filmmaker, and the founder of InPeak. My guest on today's podcast is Gmoney, a crypto native entrepreneur and investor who is one of the most influential people in the crypto and NFT space right now. Gmoney is the creator of Amit One, a collection of 1,000 NFTs that give you access to his Discord. After this recording, G and I had a long conversation off the record about the things that he was not yet ready to discuss on the recording. All I can say is that he has big plans for Amit One. And as a holder of one of his NFTs, I'm super excited to be part of this journey with him. He's also promised me that he will come back on the podcast to explain more about what he's doing in the fashion and lifestyle area very soon. So without further ado, let's listen to this conversation with Gmoney. I am both a member of Proof and Amit One, and a lot of people have had questions as well. And so I'm going to build those into the conversation that we're going to have. But also, I wanted to first start with why you started Amit One, because I discovered it on Overpriced JPEGs when you were talking to Cardi, and I was like, okay, this sounds very interesting. And then I hadn't heard anything about it before. So then I went and checked it out, and then I asked Seneca. I was like, do you know anything about this? And he said, yeah, G is great. I think he's doing some great stuff in the space. So a lot of people who are in Proof also, they have been asking, how's it going in that Discord? What's happening? Should we buy? Should we join? So I thought that it would be a very good opportunity for you to tell us a little bit about why you started it, what are your plans with it, and where are you going with Amit One?
Yeah, so it's funny you asked me for kind of a quasi roadmap, which I've been very cognizant of not sharing. The reason why I started Amit One was because I know of the cool things that I'm working on that are coming in the pipeline, and I want to have a community that can take part in those cool opportunities that I think are coming, that I'm excited about. I worked with Adidas last year and help them launch their NFT project into the metaverse. And I think that's been doing really well. And I think the reception in the market and the plans that they have, I'm excited about whenever I see the roadmap. But then when I take a look at like all the other cool opportunities that are out there, I really knew that I would like to have a group that is kind of like, that feels the same way, just the same way I do about the space and about how important the technology is and how important it is to onboard the masses, whether it be major brands or just, your neighbor, right? And how important this technology is for the future. And that's really why I started the community, right? I can only leave it at that for now. I do have plans that I've been working on for, over a year at this point. When I set out to build the community in and of itself, I decided it, like in March, April of last year. So this was a slow, long, and deliberate process, and I didn't want to rush it. Doing it in the depths of a bear market is actually, I think, better than in a bull market, because I think in a bull market, everyone is very focused on price and, what are you going to do to send the price up and this and that. And so to me, it's like, I know that a lot of the, cool stuff takes time, right? Like to really do really cool and innovative things, and it doesn't happen overnight. And that's partly why I distributed it for free, was because I wanted a community that wasn't necessarily that focused on, oh, like I bought it at X, I want to sell it at 3X or 4X or whatever. That to me is more important of creating that community. I think as a member of the community, you've probably seen that in the Discord. Like I'm in a bunch of Discords. Like I think the Discord in Amit One is pretty wholesome and like good, and like, everybody's helping each other, and you have, everything from, founders of big DeFi projects to, people that this is their first NFT. So that to me is really exciting, because I really do think that, it really is like, when you think about it and you think about disruption at any level throughout history, it's not just like an engineer like thinks of something cool. It's like, a lot of different diverse backgrounds, right? Like even take a look at Apple, right? And like Steve Jobs, he was a multidisciplinary student and he studied so many different things. And that's why Apple was able to do what it did, right? And I think getting a really diverse group of people together, from artists to engineers to founders to investors, I think is really cool for perspective as well as for really pushing the space and innovating.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. So this brings two things in my mind. One is that with regards to the price, yes, you had free mint, but like a lot of people like myself, for example, I bought it at 15 ETH, right? Like I bought it at the top, and I don't think it has gone any higher than that. So for a lot of people who are thinking of buying in now, they're wanting to know, where you're going with it, and of course. One thing that's really interesting is that this dynamic of, you buy something like a token, and then essentially it's like you're investing in that entrepreneur, and that entrepreneur tells you, look, I have plans, just take my word for it. And it's like, it's coming. Yeah. And then you have to put your trust in them and kind of like wait. And this space is not very patient. Like this is I've seen it, over and over, especially now with things like these, let's say, degen drops that are being dropped every day, where people buy something and they're like, okay, in two days time, in a week time, that thing is completely forgotten most of the time. So people are getting conditioned to wanting something to happen constantly. So as a founder and as an entrepreneur, how do you deal with that? You mentioned Apple, like that's a very good example, I think, of Steve Jobs, just sort of sticking to his guns and saying, like, this is what we're going to do, and not necessarily pandering to anybody's pressures. But in this new market that is being developed, in a way, you could see this in the NFT space. It's even worse than social media, because you're constantly expected to deliver.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely pressure. I think the price has gone up more than I ever imagined it would, especially at the outset. I was very, very upfront saying that there would never be a roadmap, right? For this, I come from public markets. I was trading equities professionally for 15 plus years. Like, no company ever gives you a roadmap, right? So, people in the NFT space are conditioned to roadmaps, because roadmaps were something that happened during the bull market, where, people would put out collections, and the price wouldn't go up. So then they were like, oh, we're going to build a roadmap. And that's really the genesis of roadmaps, right? Is where, people trying to create promises and then deliver on them in the future. That's legit what a roadmap is. But when you look at, all the publicly traded companies out there, like Nike doesn't tell you what their plan is for the next year. Like, are you kidding me? Like, they have competition out there. Like, no real business out there gives a roadmap, right? As an investor, as somebody that is a collector, you have to, I think I have a reputation in the space, and people know that I've executed. I personally think that I've done really cool stuff in the past. And I do think that my best work lies ahead of me. And so this was kind of my way to get my community involved. So, I do think that people in the space have really short timeframes, and they really like you said, like are looking for 1 to 3 days out, and that's fine. That's not a member I want in my community, right? Because I'm not here to make a quick buck, and for somebody to pump the price, and like I very much discourage price talk in Discord. We don't even have a sales bot, because I don't want people talking about price, because to me the price is irrelevant, because I think over time that there will be enough value created that people will be really happy that they're part of the community.
That's so helpful. And I really love what you said about the fact that in the usual, the typical, the non-Web3 space, nobody tells you what their roadmap is. And a lot of times they may not even have it, because it's something that it develops as they go along. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, when I started InPeak, it actually started as FemPeak, and it was going to be mostly focused on women, which is something that I want to talk to you about as well. And then I noticed that there just aren't enough women in the space, and it wasn't scalable, and I couldn't build, around just women. And the things that we were teaching were not necessarily just focused on women anyway. Like we were teaching everything to do with Web3. So it just didn't make sense that we would, limit ourselves to just a subset of, humanity, and especially in a market where there just aren't enough women. And I don't know whether in the long run, whether this is something that will be solved. And I want to talk to you about that. But that just goes to show that, you're not able to have a roadmap and stick to it. And that can be debilitating as as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, to your point, I think anybody, I think if you've been in the space for more than 2 months, you know how quickly it moves, and you know how versatile you have to be, right? You have to be able to pivot as the market changes. And, as the market, when I started working on this community back in January, like really, really working on, the details of it and the launch and how I would do distribution and stuff like that, Ethereum, I think, was above $2,500. It might've been above $3,000, right? And so here we are now, it's, 70, 80% lower from the highs. And it's a very, very different market. If I wanted to execute the plan that I had back then, it would be tone deaf, right? So it's very much, and I think any founder in any business, whether it's crypto or not, it's good to have a line of sight of this is where I want to end up. Yeah. But how you get there is going to be different because of changing market conditions and what have you.
Exactly. So with that, actually, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to take your advice and consultation on what I'm doing. So when you're saying, for example, that you have to have the end goal in sight, but then so the way I see it is let's say you know that you are going to get from London to New York, but then from here on, your eyes have to be only on the next 200 meters. What I'm trying to build here with InPeak is a platform which is kind of like an education platform, unlike anything else, in the sense of being completely inclusive and being completely up to date all the time. So one of the biggest problems with this space is that it's moving so fast. And I believe that we are moving towards a technological singularity. So the speed is going to just increase and increase. So there's no form of education. So for example, recorded courses or, things like university, don't even think about it. Imagine trying to teach these things that are happening in the NFT space in university. By the time you create a curriculum, the time has passed and things have changed. So for example, something like marketing, I've always been saying for the past few years that there's no point in doing a marketing degree, because whatever you learn by the time you come out of university, that's all past, right? So what I'm building is a platform that eventually is going to have 24 sessions a day, every hour of the day, 24 sessions, 7 days a week, every hour of the day, different educators coming in, explaining everything to do with emerging technologies as it happens, explaining, say, the bear market of 2022. This is how it's different from other bear markets. This is where we are now. This is what we are going to do. This is what the pulse of the market is right now. We are going to build this way. And then over time, we want to expand that to other areas of emerging technology as well. But to begin with, it's mostly focused on Web3, NFT, crypto, financial markets, all that stuff. And we wanted to be in different languages for different time zones. This is something that's never been done before. And it's all online, and then it all gets recorded. So we run the sessions constantly, and it gets recorded, goes into our on-demand section. People can see it, and they can watch it, if they can't capture it on that at that specific time. So right now we have about 4 or 5 sessions a week. So it's one a day on weekdays. And I've also experimented with weekends sometimes. So at some point we were running about 8 to 10 a week. And then because the bear market pulled back a little bit to kind of figure out, what's happening. So that's what we're building. And then we're going to be releasing an NFT, and the NFT will give people specific perks. So there's a a subscription model, and then the NFT will give people specific perks. For example, I want to build a studio where we do these podcast interviews in person, and people can come in, and there will be like a seating, where people can come in and be there, and only NFT holders can get access to that, or the NFT holders are the ones who get access to the Discord, or the closer level of access than everybody else. Yeah, I would love to know your thoughts on that business model and idea.
I think that's really interesting. I definitely think it's needed. Off the top of my head, I think there are some people that definitely have this idea of being maybe like a 24-hour crypto news network, which I think will exist at some point, but I don't think you're taking that one step further, right? Which I think is really cool, because you like, as you talk about emerging tech, it's like crypto is one of them, but then it's like life extension and space exploration, and renewable energy and all this cool stuff that, like, personally, like, I don't have the time to know about. But if there was like a cool a place where I can go and be like, all right, I watch this show once a week, right? Or like a half hour every day, and I get caught up on what's happening in, some field that I don't know about. I find that super valuable. I think that's really cool. I think, did you say that you wanted to do something with subscriptions or with NFTs?
Both.
I definitely think that you should go both, right? Because the problem I've seen that, and even, with Admit One, and this is why I put an end date of 3 years from now, because it was like, if it's a subscription model, and I've seen this so many times where people have sold an NFT or people have sold a token, and then all of a sudden that gives you lifetime access, like it just like goes against the wanting to build a community, right? Because then as the creator, right, you want people to trade it so that you can generate income, but you also want to have a good and stable community, right? I think NFTs are just so new that people are just learning how to use the tech. So you just see people running through these iterations. And I personally think what would make sense in that model is probably a subscription that people pay. And you can either do that a Web2 or Web3 subscription, but then also an NFT that's like a VIP club of sorts, where it gets you access, and these are all things that I've considered with Admit One, right? Where it's like, I did an AMA a few weeks ago in the Discord where we were discussing the Fed rate decision, right? Because I have a finance background. I got a couple of my friends from trading to sit there and discuss it. And, you at least have some sort of a professional opinion that I have an edge that I can now, provide to my community. And, I didn't think that there would be that many people that showed up. And like, we had, I think 150 or 200 people that showed up, in the middle of the day on a Wednesday. And we didn't even really discuss it. I didn't tweet about it till maybe like an hour before, because it was like a kind of a last second thing. But I was like, oh, having something like that, doing AMAs, allowing people to watch recordings live and maybe ask questions once a week or something like that. I think that's like, those perks like that is what you go to the VIP tier, and you create kind of like this, more of a tight knit community around that. And then you have people that are just like, oh, I just want the subscription. And I'm not sure I want to be partaking in the community to start. And you can go that route, which is the cheaper route.
Yeah, and also right now already, all of our events are live, and people can participate. Like, there's always a live audience, and people can ask questions live. But then we can take that to a whole new level of like, then you get also the Discord access and that additional kind of support to answer your questions, even after you have watched it. But yes, so you mentioned about Web2 and Web3 subscription. How do they differ?
So Web2 subscription is what we know. You put in your credit card and, you get billed monthly. Web3 is like streaming from your wallet real time. So like, if let's say you pay $30 a month for something, right? So that's $1 a day. And you will stream that $30 over the course of that month continuously every second. So then if, let's say, I sit down and I'm like, all right, on the 15th of the month, and then, I cancel it, or the 13th or whatever. On the 13th of the month, I cancel it. Then I only pay up until the second that I cancel it, but then my access is revoked, right? So then what does that do? There's a company, a protocol that I invested in called Superfluid. I invested in them last year, and they do this, right? It's streaming payments on chain, so that because the issue with Web2, right, is one is I could one dispute it, right, as the customer, and then we have that dispute claim. Two is I also get charged, that final month, so I get charged for some time that I don't use it. But then also three is there's some sort of net 30, net 60 payday for you as the vendor, where you get paid from the credit card processor, right? And so like there's a lot of these things that kind of like a lot of trade finance comes in at that, right? Where people will finance, your terms and all this stuff. And there's a lot of commerce that happens there, but like it doesn't need to necessarily happen there, right? And if I'm streaming payments directly to you for services rendered up until the second that I cancel it, then like that is like the cleanest thing possible, right? And so that's kind of like Web3 streaming, and I think we're in the really early days of that.
That's amazing. For us, I think it's at the moment using the Web2 model works better, because a lot of people who are coming into our platform don't even have a wallet yet. But I can see that second model being really good for people who are already in the Web3 space, who have a wallet. I can see that being super helpful. So this is great. I learned something new there. So I'm just looking here at some of the other things that people have asked. One was about gratitude. Why is it important to have gratitude in a Discord group, and why do you in general encourage the idea of thinking about gratitude?
Yeah, because I think especially when it comes to I come from a business where the only thing was focused on making money, right? Yeah. So whether I had a good day or a bad day at work was determined by how much I made or how much I lost. And so it's very emotionally taxing to be in a business like that. Like trading, I think, is one of the most emotionally taxing things out there, because you could work hours and like lose a ton of money, even though you could have been right. Like there's just so many things out of your control. And it's just really a disciplined practice of focusing on the things that you can control. And, one of the things, and I remember years ago, I used to listen to this podcast. I forgot what the podcast was, but at the end of the podcast, the interviewer would always ask him, what are the things that you think have led to your success? And, he would always be asking very high performing individuals, top of their field, no matter what fields they were in. And almost all of them were, they all said practicing gratitude, right? Of, wanting to achieve more, but also being happy with what you have and being grateful with what you have. And, that gratitude mindset. And I remember like, after hearing it like 7 or 8 times over the course of like maybe like 10 podcasts, I was like, okay, like, let me like Google it. And, I think Tim Ferriss talks about it a lot. There's a lot of really well-known podcasters that talk about gratitude. And I just started practicing gratitude where, I wake up every morning, write down 5 things that I'm grateful for. And I try to do that every day still, at the very least one, right? One thing that I'm grateful for. Even if you're having a terrible day, there's always, you're alive and breathing, right? You felt the warmth of the sun. There's so many things that you can be grateful for, but really having that attitude of being grateful for things, it's like leads to that mindset of abundance, which kind of brings more opportunities to you. And I know that for me, it really kind of changed my perspective on life when I started adopting things like that, where I went from being a much, let's say, less, I wasn't as happy, right? I just I had achieved a ton of financial success. On paper, my life was great, but I wasn't as happy as I wanted to be. And part of that was because, I wasn't as grateful for the things that I did have, because I was always like, oh, well, more, comparing to others and all these things, when it's like, I think I read it yesterday where it's like, the number one thing to not be happy is just to make a comparison, right? Like, because it's like there's always going to be somebody that has more or better of something. But if you can learn to be grateful with what you have, then, you'll be an infinitely happier person. So that for me has been my driving factor for that. The only reason I don't post a gratitude post every day on Twitter is because I don't want to spam people. So I figure, once a week, on Sunday is good enough. And then I remember I posted it one Sunday and we had this exact conversation in the Discord. And I was happy in the sense that like there were other people that were like, oh yeah, like I practice gratitude as well. And it wasn't even my suggestion to start the Discord, the gratitude channel in the Discord. It was like 2 or 3 other members. And I was like, fuck yeah, like let's do it. Like, this is something I very much believe in. And I think it also leads to like the good vibe in the Discord where, people are like helping each other get onto allow lists. And, if somebody doesn't know something, like I think it's an overall positive vibe that's very, very different than most vibes I see in most Discords.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. I love that. So, G, can you tell me a little bit about your background? Like you were American or you are American?
Yeah, I'm American. My parents are immigrants from South America. From my dad is from Uruguay, my mom is from Ecuador, and I grew up in a suburb outside of New York City. And I was always interested in the stock market from like a really young age. And I got it, I started investing when I was 14 years old. I had some scholarship money for high school, and I made a deal with my parents that the money that they would have end up spending on my tuition to let me invest. And that was in 1996. And I bought a bunch of internet stocks. I rode them all the way up, and then I didn't sell anything, and I rode them all the way back down. Oh. And but that was like a really
that was a learning
lesson for me. Yeah, that was that was super important for me when I got into crypto. 17 years later, 15 years later, because I remember in 2017 when I started buying Ethereum. In Q1 of 2018, it just felt very frothy. It reminded me so much of the dot-com bubble. And I was like, the tech is real. It's here to stay. It's going to change the world, but it's still too early, right? And it's like, do I want to sit around? I had a good business trading equities at that point. And I was like, I could stick around and stay around through the bear market, or I could go back to trading equities, keeping an eye on crypto, and then really come into the space afterwards. And I did. I came back in 2020 in full force. And when I found NFTs in August of 2020, it really made sense to me right away. Yeah. Because I was playing Fortnite at the beginning of quarantine, and all the kids were running around like buying skins. I was like, wow, there's going to be this massive super cycle here of that kid 10 years from now. He's going to be totally okay with owning a purely digital asset, and he's going to have his own money to spend on it. And that to me, I was like, wow, all right, we're on like the precipice of really this breaking out. I thought it would take 5 to 7 years. And then, lo and behold, crypto tech started making cool stuff within 2 years, right? And so to me, and the reason why I really dove headfirst into the NFT space was because for me, NFTs are the Trojan horse that's going to take crypto technology mainstream, right? In the sense that everybody knows what the stock market is, right? But not everybody trades stocks, right? And the same thing happens with, your ERC20 tokens, right? Your fungible tokens, where not everybody is driven by money games and wants to sit in front of a computer, yield farming and trading and doing all this stuff all day. But there's, things that humans do understand is collecting. They understand art, they understand community, right? Because that's literally, if you look at, you don't even need to show a child how to collect something or how to draw something, right? Like it's something that we innately understand. And so to me, it's like, these are the things that will take the technology mainstream, because at some point people won't say, oh, I want that NFT. They're going to say, I want that, digital wearable. And it will just so happen to be an NFT. For the same reason, right? When we go to a website right now, we don't say, oh, like, I connected to the TCP IP, blah, 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 like all that technical jargon that we don't know how to operate. Like, I can just go onto Facebook and like a photo, right? And at some point it's going to get that easy. And we're at the beginning of that all being made right now.
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the things I do, we're working with different companies, even large banks and law firms thinking about wanting to come into this space. And I recently had a presentation at a very large bank, and the people were asking me about where do NFTs get their value? what's the valuation model? They're looking for a tangible way of understanding why a certain NFT is worth. For example, if you say your moonbird is worth this much, why is it worth this much? Or your punk, etc. So then I started a little squad of us in Proof, and actually a couple of people from Amit One also joining in, and we are working on figuring out how to explain to people how NFTs are valued. Do you think that at some point we will get to a place where this will be something that will be solidified, like a model, like, how right now there is like a rough model of how you value a company,
Right.
a startup, starts,
Yeah.
and they haven't had any, like the company that I'm building, we've already raised our pre-seed fund at 25 million pound valuation, but but we're a startup.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I think that just like in the real world, every NFT will have a different valuation model. So it won't be something that's standardized across the space, right? So when I first, right, like everything in the real world is an NFT, right? So the way you value your chair is different than the way you value your computer, which is different than the way you value your art on your wall, which is the way different than you value your mortgage, right? And so all those things are NFTs. And I think the same thing will happen in the NFT space, right? Where it's like, okay, punks will derive their value because of these certain conditions. Something like Proof, moonbirds will derive their value because of these set of conditions, right? Like I think we can all agree that you're not necessarily, even Amit One, right? You're not necessarily buying Amit One because of the art behind it, right? You're buying it because of the perceived utility behind it. And the same thing with moonbirds and the same thing with Proof. But that's very different valuation metric than the way you would value a CryptoPunk, right? And so I think that there's going to be different verticals for, the way you value art is a certain way, the way you value an auto loan is another way, right? And I think as, let's say, mortgages come on chain, there will be, and those are easy valuations, right? Like if something has cash flow, you just DCF it, and it's really easy to come up to with a net present value of it, right? The hard stuff is, why is a Bored Ape worth $100,000? Why is some artists worth X, right? But that's just like the market, right? That's just like for the same reason that why is a Warhol worth X and a Picasso worth Y, right? These are all things that, like, if you wanted to standardize even valuations across art, I don't even know if there is a standard valuation across art, right? It's more like, I think a lot of these pieces are so rare and so sought after that when they come for sale, you have to have the money and be willing, ready, and able to buy it. And that's in the art world, right? But I do think that we're probably going to have a bunch of different valuation models. And I think at some point, NFTs will no longer be classified as NFTs. We'll be calling them like a digital shirt or like a digital pillow, or, you know what I mean? Because it's like, I think NFTs, that's like calling a category NFTs. It's like calling everything in the real world like something, right? It's like, oh, this is something. Right. And so, yeah, it's like, but we need to be a little more specific, right? Because I can't sit there at the dinner table and say, hey, can you pass me the something? Because there's, 100 somethings in front of us, right? So I do think that we're probably going to get some more, much more
Granularity.
Granularity to what something is specifically. And then that will be able to lead us to the breakdowns of valuations, I think.
Okay, this is super helpful because now we're like, we started brainstorming this thing and it's so difficult. It's like, where do you start? So another one of the questions I had here, somebody said, Lucky Ninja from, I think he's from Amit One. He said, if you had to start over again with nothing, literally nothing but your clothes and like $100, what country, city, state, town would you choose and why? And before you answer that, this is what I told him. Your question, presumes that somebody has the choice of where to live. Like, for example, in my case, I think I sent you an email as well when I was very, very upset. I was trying to get to NFT NYC and I was denied an ESTA, because I was born in Iran, even though I'm a British citizen. And it seems to be a new rule that was put in place by President Trump that has actually been not overturned after Biden, and it's still in place. So in 2017, I went to New York to interview Gary Vaynerchuk for my documentary. I didn't need a visa. I just got an ESTA. But now I need a visa to get to America. And I've applied for one, and they've given me an appointment for January 2023. It's like 7 months from now, right? This is like quite ridiculous considering that I'm now a British citizen. But because I was born in Iran, like I have this limitation. So this question is very, very interesting question. And it just goes to show the level of, going back to that gratitude, the level of lack of understanding that a lot of us have about where we come from and the things that we already have in our lives. Like, for example, being born an American is so different than being born an Iranian, because that's something that even if no matter how much achievement you have in life, that's still in my passport that I was born in Tehran. And that's always going to be something that holds me back. Because of that, even though I spent $140,000 to buy a proof pass, I couldn't get to the proof, lounge party, right?
Right. No, I mean, that makes total sense, right? And I think, it's funny because as I sit here and I think about it, it's like, honestly, like anywhere in America, right? I'm so grateful that I was born in America, that my parents immigrated to America and were able to immigrate to America, right? Because they were, in South America, and especially at the time that they went, America had more of an open borders policy, right? And so that they were able to go through the process. I think it took my mom like 20 years to end up becoming a US citizen, right? Because she only had a green card. And, I remember when I was a kid, she had a green card, and then she ended up becoming an actual US citizen, I think sometime after I was born. But my dad came at a time and there was a shortage in the workforce. And so, they were granting anybody US citizenship because they needed more workers, right? And so that, I'm very fortunate that I was born in the United States. And honestly, if I had to pick anywhere to be born and, with nothing and start over again, it would honestly be New York City. Like I love New York so much. I lived in Manhattan for 13 years and, I saved nothing, right? And that's partly why I ended up moving, 5 years ago. But I ended up moving because the cost of living there is really expensive. But the experiences that I had living there are like things that I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life. And I just think there's really no city in the world that's like New York in terms of experiencing other cultures and being able to do stuff at almost any time of the day. And, I like comedy shows, like I like comedians. So like being able to go to a comedy show any night of the week and be able to see like pretty good stand-up comedy, right? Which is not a luxury you have in most cities in America, let alone in the world. So to me, it's like, just stuff like that, access to amazing food and amazing people. I think that the experiences that I got there have really helped me for everything else in my life. But yeah, like I couldn't be a bigger fan of New York.
Yeah, I totally agree. I always, imagine myself wanting to live in New York at some point. But nowadays I have concerns because of now there's a gun thing, and also the other thing is obviously they're not very crypto friendly, and in this space that we are in right now. But in general, New York is an incredible place, and so that would be your answer. That's where you would start.
And also, and I'll just add one more thing. And the reason why I choose New York over a city like London, because I think London has a lot of the same qualities that New York does, but New York is just very compact in the sense that like I can get from like downtown to uptown in like 20 minutes on the subway. Yeah. And the last time I was in London, I remember like I'd be in a cab for like 40 minutes going from like West London to East London. And I'm like, by the time I get there, I'm like, wow, I'm tired. I want to go home. Yeah. Like it's just such a large city that it's really hard to get from place to place.
Yeah, and there is a tube, but it's not great.
Right. Yeah.
Public transport isn't great here. So another person said, it would be cool if you could ask him in which intensity he was forced to upgrade his tech skills, with the journey in Web3, and so yeah, so essentially, you went from that kind of stock market and financial background. How much time did you put into learning about Web3, and how quickly did you have to learn?
Right. So I'm not a developer for sure. Right. I think I've always been a futurist. I've always been interested in new technology ever since I was a little kid. I remember when, we got computers in my house for the first time. Like, I would be on the internet in like, IRC chats, like trying to download like CDs and music and like software and all this stuff, like kind of like, really like technical stuff. And I would like try to figure it out even from a little kid, but I was never a programmer. I remember I learned how to program in Python a few years ago, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. I took a course on, I think it was Udacity, and it was like a 30-day course, or what, it may have been like a 2 or 3 month course, and I did it in a month because I really wanted to learn. I never did it. I think I wrote 1 or 2 scripts or work. This is back when I was still trading. I wrote like 1 or 2 scripts, but it was just a better use of my time to hire a developer to actually do it rather than do it on my own. But I actually I actually understood like the syntax of coding. Whether or not I could code on my own was a different thing. I never did anything with that afterwards, but like, I'm sure if I can look at a Python code, like I can at least understand it a little bit. But I know without a doubt I have no dev skills whatsoever. For me, I think one of the things that I just understand how like the tech works, even though I don't understand how to implement it, right? So it's like I understand why NFT tech is important. I understand, the actual, the mechanisms of how things work, but I don't know how to actually code it. And that to me is really just like learning from people smarter than me, and like not being afraid to ask questions, and not being afraid to sound dumb, right? Because I don't think there are any dumb questions, because somebody, if I don't understand it and somebody helps me understand it, then maybe I can add value and be like, oh, well, what if you did it this way, right? And that's, again, like that's where that creativity of new ideas comes in, and having different perspectives is what leads to that like explosion of creative ideas.
Amazing. So, okay, as a last question, I see that most of the questions I had written here from the community was about Amit One, and you pretty much explained that. You said that just wait, it's coming utility, because they're basically like when utility, right? So do you want to maybe give us a rough timeline of when we will see one of your master plans, coming to fruition?
I don't want to give a rough timeline. I know it's hopefully soon, but they're like anything in life, there keep being delays, and I don't want to commit to a certain time frame and not put out something that I'm totally, completely happy to put my name on just because I want to be committed to a certain date. I just know I'm working on cool things. I have a lot of cool ongoing conversations. I'm excited with the things that I'm doing. I just, again, I don't want to commit to dates, just because I don't want to be held to those, and people like trying to hit deadlines just to hit deadlines to save face, when I want to focus on being able to put out the best quality product that I can.
Yeah, I think this is what we should teach the people who are trying to do the merge, right? Like, don't give a date.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's coming. Okay, awesome. So this is great. It has been a great conversation. Is there any last words that you want to leave our audience with? So the kind of people who listen to this, a lot of people who are in different discords that are, that I'm part of, would listen, my Twitter audience, and I have a big audience on LinkedIn as well, a lot of them are new to this space, completely new. People listen to this from banks and, a lot of, like I said, law firms and people who are like just starting in this space. So if any words that you have for people coming into the space?
Yeah, I think now is the perfect time to come in, right? When, the froth is now gone, right? You can come in, you can get involved in projects. The Discords aren't as focused on price, right? Like people that are sticking around or people that are there for the community. I think one of the most interesting things about NFT NYC last week that I saw from watching and hearing about the events is the community, right? And like, even though prices are down so much, people still showed up and people were still happy to be there, which I think is super interesting because it just means that like, this is when like the real communities are made. And like, again, because people aren't focused on price, people are focused on doing cool and innovative things. And that's where like the real the next bull market is going to be born out of this, out of all the cool things that are happening now, and the groundwork's being laid now is going to really pop off in the next few years once people start getting interested again, right, into the tech, because the tech isn't going anywhere, because the tech is super important for, you know, self-sovereignty in the future, and, you know, digital asset rights and all these things that are super important to human beings in the real world, that will be equally as important in the digital world.
Amazing. That was really helpful. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Gmoney. Be sure to follow him on Twitter and keep an eye out for my next podcast interview with him coming very soon. If you enjoy this podcast, be sure to subscribe to it on Apple, Spotify, or any other one of your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to give it a 5-star rating and write a review. The full interviews are also available on my YouTube channel, The Somi Arian Show.